Second, if you don't mind, can you please in the chat provide us with your contact information? For a couple of reasons. One, we will send all of the participants in this webinar a copy of our new reader on democracy that has just come out. It has historical writings on democracy, but it also has some contemporary Wyoming authors who are contributing to different aspects of democracy. So we want to thank you. We'll send that to you, but we'll need your contact information. I'd like to introduce the other two members of our Wyoming Humanities staff who are online. Emmy DeGrappa is our producer, and she produces our podcasts, What's Your Why and First But Last, and we'll also be exploring the topics that we're talking about today in future podcasts. And then Mark Jenkins is our resident scholar. You may have talked to him recently. His background is in journalism, and he's been reaching out to Wyoming news outlets to check in and see how things are going, because we understand how important local journalism is to our democracy. What I wanted to discuss this morning is kind of the who, what, when, how, and so what of this initiative. I'll start off by talking a little bit about our organization, Wyoming Humanities, if you're not familiar with us. We are one of the very first state humanities councils in the nation. We were formed 50 years ago through the efforts of the University of Wyoming and groups like the Stock Growers Association and wool growers and county extension offices to get humanities into rural communities. This model caught the attention of the National Endowment for the Humanities, and they created state humanities councils across the country. So now there's 56 state humanities councils, Wyoming Humanities being the first. Our mission is to strengthen Wyoming's democracy through the humanities. And we do that through lifelong learning and critical thinking, promoting civics and democracy, expanding the Wyoming narrative, and bolstering the importance of arts and culture in our economy and political discourse. We have been particularly concerned about the state of local journalism because we know how important it is to a healthy democracy. In the past, we have done initiatives related to civility and discussions with journalists. And we've tried to explore other ways in which we can help local newspapers. We think that this model of collaborative journalism is something that we may want to continue to explore in different avenues in the future. So this is going to be kind of our test case of how to do it. And I'm sure there will be a lot of lessons learned. But over the coming 2 years, besides these issues related to civics and democracy, we're going to be doing some deep dives into Wyoming's identity, Wyoming's sense of community, Wyoming's connection to the land, Wyoming's ability to manage change, and Wyoming's persistence. We'll be exploring those through content that we develop, discussions that we convene, grants that we make to local organizations. And I would imagine that if this effort is successful, it may be something that we can mimic in other ways to further explore those themes. But today we're going to talk more specifically about how democracy is functioning at the local level. If you didn't receive a white paper, we'd be happy to send it out to you. Darcy, were you able to send that out along with the invitation?
I did send that out to everybody.
Okay, thanks. So what we want to do today is give an overview of this initiative and ask for your input and questions to help us perfect what this will look like as we roll it out. And that rollout, I imagine, is going to be rather quick. And we're going to try to make this as meaningful and as painless as possible. But we really need, for the process and for what the approach is, we really need your input. Punch holes in this so that we can tighten things up and so it will become as great of a project as possible. We've recently received a grant from the Mellon Foundation through the Federation of State Humanities Councils to explore issues related to the electorate between now and the end of April. We're doing two main things with this grant. The first, and not the first, but one piece that we'll be working on after we get this collaborative journalism project stood up is we're going to be commissioning an assessment of Wyoming's civic engagement. Many states have these assessments, and it explores in kind of a quantitative fashion how engaged people are in their communities, with government, with our democratic institutions such as the schools and libraries, voter behavior. We expect that the assessment will put numbers to questions as to whether we trust our democracy, whether we even trust our neighbors. Do we feel our vote counts? So that's going to be the number piece. We will be talking to the University of Wyoming, and there's some other organizations that do this. We don't have that process entirely worked out yet, but the product will be a report, quantitative report to identify what's working and where there are some weak spots in Wyoming's civic engagement. That will be complemented by this initiative, which I take to be more of the storytelling angle. This collaborative journalism project isn't necessarily about the data. Rather, what are the stories in your communities about how people feel that their democracy is working, and how do we do a better job coming together with differing opinions to solve complex problems? And there are no shortages of them. We're particularly interested in conversations at the community level, and how communities can come together to solve their problems. And of course, how communities come together is dictated at some level of the national conversations and state conversations, but we're really interested in at the community level. As you saw in the white paper, the situations in Natrona County with the abrupt cancellation of a public meeting to talk about COVID, the nastiness at Gillette City Council and Campbell County Commission meetings, Jackson. There are a number of examples of where things are going sideways. And we really want to hear from the communities, members of the communities, what's working and what's not in our ability to come together in our community and solve complex problems. So what we are looking for is development of stories that your outlets would publish. We would also then get those stories and we will go through and roll up common statewide themes. We'll also match the stories to the numbers that come out of the eventual civic assessment. And from there, we'll know better what's working that we can try to, through the humanities, turn up the volume, and where are there weak spots in Wyoming, and how do we address those? It may be community specific. It may be something that we can do at the statewide level. We're not entirely sure where this will go, but we do think that there will be enough of the stories and data that we can better hone our efforts in strengthening Wyoming's democracy through the humanities. We have some suggested questions that journalists could explore, but we also want to give a lot of latitude in terms of how this subject is approached. But generally, again, what we're looking for is how do we come together in our communities with a variety of perspectives and solve complex problems in a civil and respectful means. How we would imagine this unfolding is likely next week, we will open up an opportunity for news outlets to apply for $2,000 grants. That application process, we're going to try to make it as painless as possible, but we'll be looking for what is your approach in addressing this and who are the folks that you're going to reach out to. We are particularly interested in interviews with people whose voices aren't often heard. The board of directors of Wyoming Humanities is also particularly interested in the voices and perspectives of Wyoming's youth. So we'll be asking, what is your approach and who are your audiences going to be and what is the time frame? Once we have selected the news organizations, we will provide $2,000 in funding. The mechanics of that are still being worked out. It will all be online. Payments will be made through our bill.com system. It's likely we'll need a W-9 form, and there may be some other things that we need, and I need to talk to our accounting firm to get those mechanics. We're going to do this on the honor system, and as we do with other grants, the funds will be awarded before the final products. We're doing that at some risk, but you're all professionals and have your own code of ethics, and we trust that these things will get done. We're hoping that the articles will be published locally between the holidays, and I think the white paper said March. We would really like to have them earlier than that. I think our initial idea was to have these articles published by the time the legislature convenes in Cheyenne. Now that that's changed, we can push that off, but ideally we're looking at during the months of January and February is when these articles would get published. The timing is important because there could continue to be a lot of messiness between now and the inauguration, tensions high, so that time seems to be a good time period to explore these issues and apply what's going on nationally to the local level. As the articles are published, we will also ask to get a copy of them along with any photographs, again, so that we can help push them out individually, but also we can use that content to explore these statewide themes. Concurrent to all of this, and as kind of a side initiative, we are going to be commissioning some political cartoons, and we'll have a caption contest for political cartoons that are commissioned that will touch on themes such as trust in our neighbors or trust in democracy. As part of this, we'd ask that the news outlets publish those caption contest winners along with the original caption that the political cartoonists had developed and not revealed until the caption contests winners are selected. We'll have more details about that forthcoming. Mark, what do you think I'm missing before we open it up to questions and feedback?
Thanks, Sean. I think that was a great introduction. I would say that Wyoming Humanities is very excited about this project because you are the people on the ground. You are the ones who are reporters or editors or both, who are talking to people in this state every day. And Wyoming Humanities is quite concerned that journalism is struggling across the nation, but particularly in small communities. Lots of small newspapers have either disappeared or they've been compressed down to something so tiny that they don't have much news and just more advertising. And this is due to all the kind of constraints that all of us know about, those of us who are journalists. So we're hoping that you guys are willing to get out in the streets and start talking to people who you feel haven't been heard. These could be underserved populations like our Hispanic population here in Wyoming, our Native American population, our Basque population, but it also includes older people, younger people, people that might not be, that might have not have had their voice heard in your local newspaper or statewide. And what's the point? I think Sean already kind of made it quite clear, but the hope is to find ways that small communities can come together to find solutions to their problems. There's no expectation that you're going to find solutions for the nation or the state. It's more that can local people solve local issues and not just fight about it. So part of this webinar right now is really, I think we've probably given you enough from our side, is to hear you talk about this idea, to give us what you think might work and what might not work. General kind of response to the whole idea of itself. And so I'll throw it back to you, Sean, but I'm hoping to hear from each of you about how you imagine this could play out in your community.
I think I'll just open it up for questions. I think there's it's manageable, so feel free just to chime in with your question or feedback.
Sean, and Mark, this is Brian Martin of the Tribune Eagle in Cheyenne. We had a conversation among the reporting team the other day about this, and we liked the idea of the project, but I think it was a little nebulous in terms of exactly what you were looking for. I've gotten a little better idea from your introduction today, but are you looking for specific stories from individuals about their experiences, obstacles, successes in interacting with local government and getting their voice heard? Are you looking for a variety or a bigger story about ways we can improve that, or kind of all of the above? We were kind of having a harder time narrowing the focus and deciding what approach we would take here in Cheyenne.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Brian. I think that the best answer I can give is all of the above. We imagine that some of these articles will be focused on, more at the individual level and telling someone's story. We think that others will be more at a community level, talking more generally, but with, touch points to people, individuals, but more at the community level. I expect, and I think it would be good to have a variety of approaches to this, and we'll actually be putting what your approach is back on the newspapers as part of that application process. But we're open and encouraging a variety of approaches to this. Did that sufficiently dodge your question, Brian?
No, I think that helped, Sean. It sounds like it's pretty open-ended, and that's the sense that we got. We just want to make sure that we're really addressing and getting the information that you're looking for. And you answered the data question. I mean, part of what we had is wondering from a data perspective, what kind of things people were thinking. And we obviously aren't going to go out and do that kind of surveying.
Right.
But you guys already are working with the universities. So this is the more the people storytelling side of
Yeah.
that. We can report on the data once it's available.
Yeah. Ideally, we would have that data piece first that you could use as you build your storyboard. But unfortunately, the timing is just not going to work. So they're going to come together. I think either of these initiatives will stand alone, but they'll eventually come together, but not perhaps in an ideal fashion.
Right. So one thing that, and I'll just run this by you, but one thing that comes to mind is we had a really interesting community conversation about residence area representation on our school board this year. And we covered it, we editorialized about it, and ultimately the school board changed their position. And so I think talking to some of those folks who were involved in that from a grassroots effort and testified in front of the school board multiple times, getting their stories and their experiences would be a good look back on what worked and what didn't work, as just an example of one story that we're thinking of right off the top.
Yeah, that's a wonderful example. And we do hope that locally this effort will materialize as change, positive change.
All right, I think that's a great one. You know, things have already been happening in all of our communities around the state that are pretty contentious and pretty pretty polarized, right? So you may be able to take an event that's already occurred and find people on either side of the, or maybe either side of the aisle. It could be all over the place. It doesn't really matter. But giving their viewpoint on this particular small subject, which is representative of the loggerheads that we're running into in communities. It could be a city council meeting. It could be a county commissioner meeting. It could be a school board meeting where some of these issues are brought up. I think it's up to the creativity of your reporters who want to kind of follow their nose, really. That's why we sound so vague, Sean and I, is we really want to give enough room for you guys to explore this creatively and learn what you learn. I mean, it should be something where you don't have an answer when you're starting. You have a kind of an idea of what you're looking for generally, and it may not be what you end up finding. We've even talked about ideas where for many of us, it seems as if the nation is polarized, and Wyoming is kind of an example of that. But then when you look at voting, for instance, up in the northeastern part of the state, almost everybody's voting the same way. So maybe it's not polarized. Maybe they don't feel this polarization. Maybe they don't feel that. But I know that in other communities, it is happening. People are struggling to come together. So I know it does sound nebulous, but I think it's up to the reporter to try to track down what they think would provide a representative story. And of course, we want voices, we want people's opinion. Those people will probably need to be named. They have to be willing to say, you know, anonymous sources for this sort of thing wouldn't be very valuable. If your reporter's talking to somebody, that person has to have enough pride or self-respect to just say, this is who I am and this is where I live and I've got 3 kids and my job is X, Y, or Z.
Other feedback or questions?
Yeah, I guess I read. Oh, sorry, talking over somebody. Hi, my name's Brandon with the Star Tribune in Casper, and I just kind of want to follow up on, you know, Mark, you just kind of mentioned contentious events around the state, and you know, I know in the white paper as well as earlier the meeting in Natrona County was brought up, and kind of the that's been certainly a big story here in Casper, and that's kind of the first thing that jumped to mind for me as well as maybe a good focus point for this project would be to, you know, look back at that, hear some of the voices involved, and maybe, you know, examine how that could have been handled differently, or what is the best way to sort of handle a situation like that. I guess I kind of just am curious about how you envision, you know, how big of a scope these stories would be. Just sort of as I'm thinking through that story, I certainly agree with the value of trying to include a lot of voices that don't typically get heard, and going out of our way to do that. I just kind of envision if we, you know, we're focusing on that that event, that county commissioners meeting, it would kind of inherently be listening to some of the louder voices, literally, and just sort of diving into that. So it feels like there'd be a lot to juggle in one story, with kind of going out of our way to sort of talk to those communities that don't necessarily get as much media coverage and representation, while diving into this, contentious meeting, if that makes any sense. And I just wonder if you have any input on kind of balancing those two things.
Brian, I mean, Brandon, sorry, I think it's inevitable that you will have to talk to the louder voices. We're just hoping that it will be counterbalanced by the people who don't often speak up, but probably represent a large, we actually, it seems to me, have an extremely vocal minority, not a silent majority. And so listening to the more silent majority, perhaps the people who, I mean, even if you were to use that Natrona County Commissioners event or debacle or whatever you want to call it, Brandon, you could certainly, most people probably will have heard about that. So you could talk to the players, but you could also talk to, I don't know, somebody in a community that might be affected by this, like a COVID positive person. My wife has COVID right now. You could talk to somebody like that in the community, or you could talk to a doctor who was obviously going to probably present a very medical perspective. We've got so many beds, and 95% of them are full. Masks make a difference. So you're right. It's inevitable that all you guys are going to have to talk to the really loud voices. We're just hoping that you can to keep your ear to the ground and try to listen and find the people who may have a voice that does represent more people in the community. Just they're not comfortable with confrontational situations. I think that's a lot of people are that way. They don't, journalists were quite used to being in the mix of it, but a lot of people don't want to do that. They're happy to share their opinion one-on-one, but they don't want to go to a meeting and get shouted at. And there are a lot of people in all of our communities in Wyoming that are like that. And so if you can find them, and how you find them, who they are, all we're really hoping is you can have a diversity.
Yeah, Brandon, what I'm hearing in your question is that example itself is huge. I mean, there's so many different angles that you could take. There's definitely that, how people get their news, and social media, which I think was kind of circulating, and Facebook prior to that meeting. And how do you narrow it down? Do we want a general overview, or do we want a specific angle? And I don't really have a great answer for you on that. I think that is going to really be largely up to you in applying for these funds. For some communities, I think a general approach to the topic might be appropriate, but I think that in other places, Casper, for example, a deeper dive into a specific facet of that situation would be meaningful and would help us understand with a little bit more specificity how to approach particular topics. Does that help?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I'm still kind of, just sort of spitballing, and only now kind of thinking this through. Certainly there's a lot more approach.
We would have called this the spitball sessions, but we're not sure if people would show up. No, I think grabbing something like you're describing, Brian, or you're describing Brandon, is a great, it does focus. For a journalist, it's hard to just go out and go, God, I can do anything. It does focus the story, and gives it a lot of an immediate structure, right, to deal with. So I think it's a smart idea. I don't want other people who haven't spoken up to not feel that you can kind of not go off of what's happened in the past, but just go out and do your own thing, though. And I do think it's important, because you guys are journalists, it is important to ask questions about where they're getting their information, whomever you talk to, because I think that's one of the common threads we will probably find in these is, a lot of people get almost all their information from Facebook. We know that. But then there are others. I used to tour the state, and I found that most older people still read the local newspaper, and most younger people didn't, right? And so there's this huge generational division between how people get their information. And I think making sure that you have a bit of a balance, talking to someone who's in their 60s versus someone who's in their 30s versus someone who's a teenager. And where are teenagers in Wyoming getting their information? It's probably some format I've never even heard of, right? They're probably doing it on something that I don't know what's going on. I think that'd be really valuable for the rest of us, though, to know. How do they hear about issues? I mean, it's going to be easy to slide into the election, Trump, but we're kind of hoping that we can, correct me if I'm wrong, Sean, but kind of hoping that we can keep it closer to the issues at hand for the people in those communities. Because it's so easy to get into generalizations about what's happening to the nation. And those are very hard to affect change in. Whereas in your local community, most Wyoming towns are small. If you get 10 people to show up to a meeting, that's great. If you get 100, you know that a lot of people care about the subject, right? That's unlike any other state in the country. So you can be involved if you want to be, and you can make a difference, I think, in this state, in your community. Whereas we all know it's quite hard to make a difference at the national level.
Bob, were you going to chime in?
He's AWOL.
No, not necessarily. You brought up the lack of polarization in the northeast corner and in that unity, and I was just chuckling thinking about doing a story from that perspective.
Is that true, or is that just I'm happy to hear your perspective on this. I was just looking at voting records. I went through every county.
Right.
And
no, I'm actually an editor in exile in Durango, Colorado. Now it's very, and so it's an interesting story. But now I've got better stories I can tell in the northeast part of the state, particularly. And Brian had talked about the school district angle down there, but redistricting is very big in the northeast part of the state. Newcastle in particular lost. Newcastle got split down the middle 10 years ago, and lost their state senator, Weston County. And so I've got a solid story there. I don't feel like wading into the waters of the vocal minority right now.
Okay. That's great. I mean, it sounds like everybody's got ideas. You're welcome to share them if you've got anything right now. If not, that's cool too. You can gestate on it, let it germinate. Tom?
Yeah, I guess Tom with the WTE. I guess one thing I was kind of curious about, just because I don't have a ton of experience working with journalism grants and stuff, is that pretty wide-ranging uses that we can have? I mean, can it go towards records requests, transportation, just kind of whatever, or do y'all have particular things y'all have in mind, I guess, for the newsrooms that do get these?
So, Tom, I think what we expect the $2,000 to go towards is the publication of these articles. We're not going to necessarily do any sort of budget breakdowns and what that approach is. So it's going to be up to the news outlets how you use that $2,000. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, I think so. I mean, as wide-ranging a use as possible is good. So, but I was just curious if y'all had anything in mind.
Yeah, and this is our first go around at some type of grant of this nature. And so I think our approach to this is being as flexible and open-ended as possible, with the idea that maybe we'll learn lessons and change things in the future if we do future collaborative journalism efforts.
Yeah, there's no audit on this. You won't be audited where you spend every penny. That's up to you. And your editor or however you guys want to work that out. And in fact, I think the money can go straight in the pockets of the journalists if the editors want that to play out that way, or maybe it'll be defrayed across the costs of doing the story through the newspaper. We don't care. We just want you to get out there and ask questions.
Darcy.
I was just wondering what other news organizations you've reached out to about the project. Like, are you working with the Broadcasters Association as well, or have they expressed interest, or just kind of in the white sheet it said, you know, nonprofit, for profit, other all sort of media organizations. I was just wondering if you could share the other interests in the collaboration.
Yeah, great question, Darcy. We've, frankly, this through the Press Association, this is the only outreach that we have done. We're particularly interested in local news organizations and more specifically interested in print media. So we have not reached out to broadcasters. We're not limiting this to, we're open to online as well, but we're really looking at the written word in this.
I'll speak up. I've just been sitting here quietly.
Thanks, Katie.
I'm with the Ranger newspaper in Riverton, and I just wanted to say I think this is a great idea, and I appreciate the opportunity to potentially be part of this project, and not just me, but our team. I've been saddened by the polarization I've seen kind of seep in from the national discourse to the local, and I'm really interested in speaking with community members about their perspective. And I think the questions that you guys suggested are great. They're open-ended. It'll start a dialogue that could go in any direction the subject wants to take it in, and the reporter can, you know, dig into those answers and try and find out more. So yeah, I've got some ideas that I'll include in an application, and I won't bore you all with those here, but I think it's great, and it came just at the right time for me personally and what I've been trying to work on. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Katie, that's exactly what we want. We're fearful of giving you too many questions because one, we want you to ask the questions you think are pertinent from a journalist editorial position, and also to let the conversation go where it goes and not be completely confined by trying to, this is a qualitative part that we will hope will blend with the quantitative data research that we're going to have conducted. So it's okay if it goes sideways in your conversations. That's kind of what we're up to, is what's really going on there. Do people understand what's happening, or are they just confused and frustrated? I mean, that's what we want to hear.
Any other questions, feedback?
I was just wondering if you guys could talk a little bit more about the application process real quick.
Yeah, so thanks for that question, Brandon. We're working on that right now. I think it will be a rather simple application where we're maybe asking a handful of questions. You know, what is your scope, your approach? Who are you going to be talking to? Your time frame? We'll want some, you know, commitment that resources will be allocated towards this initiative. But something pretty simple. We're not asking for budget breakdowns or anything like that. I expect that we'll have that ready next week, and we can begin accepting those applications. What I would propose that we communicate to the news outlets through Darcy, and she can help us disseminate the information, but it will likely be an online form, and then we'll use that to generate some sort of contract or agreement that is executed in some way. Again, I feel like I'm dodging your question, but the fact is we don't have it yet, but our goal is to keep it simple and look at those things that we've talked about today. How are you going to approach this subject?
Yeah, Brandon, I'm working on the application right now, and it's going to be hopefully one page, right? And if Darcy, is she still on?
Yeah.
If she's up for it, we will send it to her early next week, probably Monday, I would say, and it'll be a one pager. And the other thing you can do is, I think I put my. I just want to make sure that all you guys get a copy of that application because you're the ones who showed up. So Darcy, I'll get you something Monday. And it's a one-page application for this. And then you can send it out to everybody who's on, everybody beyond the people who are here, but these are the people who showed up. So you guys already have a leg up, should I say, just to show up and care about the project matters to us. Does that work, Darcy?
Yeah, absolutely. What I'll do is I'll send it out to the entire membership.
Right.
Definitely can loop these individuals into that information. If you can just send me the list of emails that are listed here, and just to make sure that they get looped in on all that correspondence.
All right.
Hey, Mark.
If you haven't put your name and email up on the chat, do so, okay? And I will collate those and I'll send those to you, Darcy, as well on Monday.
Well, also, if I could figure out the technology, I'll get you a link or a copy of this recorded webinar that you can send out for those who weren't able to attend.
Yeah, because when I send out emails, the email contact information that I have is for editors and publishers.
Right.
So for the reporters that are attending right now, I'll just want to make sure that I have their emails. And then, yeah, anything you want me to send out, a link to the webinar, additional information, application process, I'm happy to do so.
Hey, guys.
Yeah.
With all due respect to the lofty ideal of civility, in Darcy's position being what it is, I appreciate Mark saying that we get bonus points for being here because I've already texted a few sources and told them I've got a story I'm working on. So if you guys want to take this group of us who's here and shoot that out to us first or whatever, Darcy's got to represent the whole membership, but I'm with you guys. Those of us who are here today, I think have shown serious excitement in the project, and I have seriously already texted my first three sources on the story. So
Give them a day's head start before you send it to me.
No, I think it's
joking.
The people who are here are the people who, I'm sure there will be a few people who had some really important meeting and couldn't make it, but I'm glad everybody here, we really appreciate your interest and we're excited to read whatever you find. I think all of us feel like, especially COVID, we kind of feel like we're in bubbles, and you can read a national newspaper, the Washington Post and the New York Times or something, but and you can read the Star, the Casper Star, every day, but there's so much happening in these small communities that we just don't hear about much. And we're excited to hear what are the issues you guys are dealing with. And very probably they might not be what we thought they would be. That'd be even more exciting.
Yeah.
The redistricting thing you said, Bob, is very interesting. Something that obviously is always contentious, but I think, take the ideas and roll with it.
I covered that 10 years ago. So I've been thinking about a follow-up to an after action to what I covered 10 years ago. So this falls right.
Yeah.
This is perfect for that.
Okay.
And it certainly doesn't have to be about the current, before COVID and before Trump, Wyoming had a lot of issues with land and water. These are still huge issues in this state. They will be forever. Changing communities, as Sean said, we've kind of got this list of things that we use as touchstones that we call crossroads. And social change is one of them. And as mining has declined, what's happening to those communities, what's happening to those people. So it doesn't have to be on it's any subject really. It's the greater, I guess the thing that kind of connects it all. The greatest theme is how can we work together as communities and can we and how do we do that? And it could be about, loss of mining jobs in Gillette, or it could be, Katie, it could be about land issues and irrigation in your area. There's lots of stuff going on, I know, through WALK. So the subject is just kind of the structure upon which you can dig into how do we talk to each other and how do we come to consensus.
Well, I appreciate everyone joining us. I reposted my contact information in the chat, so you can capture that, and feel free to reach out to me in the meanwhile if you need to discuss this further or bounce ideas around. We'll be working with Darcy. Thank you, Darcy, in getting information out. And I think this is going to be really exciting. This is going to be a cool thing, and look forward to working with, hopefully working with you all on this or future initiatives. What you do is important, and we care about it. So
Thank you guys for doing this.
all right.
Thanks so much. We'll be in touch.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Thank you,
folks.
guys.
Thanks.
Really appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you guys for coming.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Hey, Sean,
Yeah.
you still there? I'm not sure. When we get off, I want to be able to save all this stuff in the chat.
Yeah. So go to in the chat where it says to.
Too.
There's at the far right, there's a box with 3 dots.
Got it.
If you do that, you can save that chat.
Where is it save it? I just chat saved.
It'll
Show-
save in, right, for me, it's saving in my documents.
Okay. Okay. I'm gonna try.
And I'm going to end this recording now, and hopefully it recorded successfully.
Okay, thanks for the help.
Yep.
Talk to you at 1.
Okay.